Hi guys. So this is the first for cellular respiration for Busy Bee unit. Um, just real quick before I start, this is a tough unit. So make sure that if you need to rewatch the videos, you do that. You ask questions if you have them. Um, Make sure that you pay attention in class and again, use the videos to your advantage. Um, but it's a unit where if you wait to study, it's a tough unit. The reason it's called the Busy Bee is because Mr. Riscavage and his teaching partner, Mr. Kistler, they came up with the idea. But because it's such a tough unit, they kind of made it into sort of like a competition, and they called it the Busy Bee because you're supposed to be studying on a regular basis and busy preparing for the end result, which will be your test. Okay, so in class we'll talk more about the competition itself, but please make sure that you are keeping up because this is a unit where if you don't keep up, it's not going to go well. Okay, um, so to begin cellular respiration, we talked about that earlier in the year, where basically cellular respiration is the process of converting energy that's in food into usable energy. Okay, so it says you can kind of read that introduction. It says cellular respiration, think energy. So the whole idea with this cellular respiration is how cells take energy in food and make that into a usable energy molecule called ATP. Okay, so it says in nature, cells require a continuous flow of energy. This energy is provided by the nutrients in which organisms consume, or food. Okay, living cells have efficient pathways for releasing energy from nutrients. This is respiration, releasing that energy. These pathways are a series of stepwise reactions that proceed in sequence. Again, this is respiration. Energy released in cells must be packaged in storage molecules called ATP. So respiration makes ATP. ATP will transfer this energy from one set of biochemical reactions to another, thus allowing metabolism to proceed and life to be sustained. You will learn how cells obtain from food the energy they need to carry out life functions. So, in this section, we will talk about respiration, explain why it's important, which you could already do. Respiration and photosynthesis, they are similar processes but opposite processes, but they're both very important. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to compare and contrast oxidation and reduction, which I'll talk about in a second. Identify ATP, ADP, and AMP. And during the reactions, you'll know what each one of them is. And describe the role of ATP and ADP in energy transfer. Okay, so now for the notes, cellular respiration occurs continuously in all cells. Make a note of that. Basically, all cells need energy, so all cells have to create ATP. Okay, there are two types of respiration: aerobic and anaerobic. Okay, aerobic means that it requires oxygen. So our cells require aerobic or do aerobic respiration. Okay, that's why we need to breathe to get oxygen to our cells. Anaerobic does not require oxygen. So things like bacteria, they can do anaerobic respiration. Okay, and aerobic occurs in the cytoplasm. So basically, in the fluid that's in inside of the cell, that's where aerobic occurs. And then anaerobic occurs in an organelle called the mitochondria. And it actually occurs inside these little like areas in here. This is called the matrix of the cristae, and this is where all of these reactions occur. Okay, so this is where respiration occurs. Aerobic respiration occurs here. Okay, and anaerobic is just in the fluid inside of a cell. Okay, And real quick, definition of respiration involves the transfer or release of chemical bond energy from food into a form usable by organisms. So basically, it takes a molecule such as glucose, and there's energy in those bonds. So it breaks the bonds, and when that happens, when you break that bond, energy is released, and that energy is then captured by a molecule called ATP, which is then what the cell can use whenever it needs to. Okay, so carbohydrates are the foods most commonly broken down for ATP or for energy to make ATP. I would put an arrow next to that. I would say glucose. We're gonna mostly be talking here about glucose. Most of the diagrams that we draw are going to have to do with glucose. Other molecules such as fats and proteins can be used for energy. That's what we talked about last unit. But glucose is what we use most often, so we're going to mostly talk about glucose. Okay. Some of the energy is released as heat, but most is stored in ATP. Okay, so it says in terms of heat, basically whenever we whenever we break down glucose, some of that is heat, but most of it goes into making ATP. Okay, and then you can look down there for the summary. Basically, it's kind of cut off, but that shows a cell, and inside that cell where there's energy, that's a glucose molecule. Okay, and there's energy in those bonds. So then the next thing is just showing that glucose molecule, just showing the carbons, and between all those carbons, there's energy in those bonds. So in order to release that energy, we have to break the bonds, and that's what respiration does. It breaks those bonds, and you can see there it says energy stored, then it says respiration breaks the bonds, energy is released, and then you can see that energy plus something called ADP, which we'll talk about in a second, and it's going to make ATP. And the ATP, I labeled that's usable energy. Okay, so that's usable energy. So basically, it's first page of notes. What you should know. You can kind of read over the top what we're going to have to be able to do. You should know there's two types of respiration, aerobic, anaerobic. You should know that aerobic requires oxygen. You can think of it as aerobic, think air, oxygen, but make sure you say it does not require air, it requires oxygen, because that's important. And then anaerobic does not require oxygen. You should know what respiration is, converting energy in food into usable energy called ATP. Okay, and you should know where these occur. Aerobic occurs in the cytoplasm. Anaerobic occurs in this guy called the mitochondria. Okay, so that's this is your first page video. Stay tuned for the second.